You cannot build your life with a consistent worldview that is on the shifting sands of moral relativism. Chris Langan says, in metaphysical reality, God is moral by definition, with teleology merely reflecting his nature. No extra restraints are required. In our postmodern age, we've fallen into the intellectual trap of moral relativism, thinking that there is no absolute rules to determine whether something is right or wrong. And I think this is an untold contributor to many of the ills of the modern age. Do what thou wilt, modernity says, this shall be the whole of thy law. This is recast throughout the biblical narratives, that when human beings attempt to define good and evil on their own terms, they destroy what is pure and blessed in creation as a matter of course. The morality of God is reflected in the natural law. We have a mind created by God, which is able to mirror the structure and processing of reality in the way that God intended. We're able to model reality correctly and reach true and good conclusions because our cognitive syntax is an extension of God's universal distributed form. Bishop Robert Barron remarked, the ground of morality is the very being of God. It doesn't hover above God in some determining way, nor is it an arbitrary decision of God. It is his very being. God, as a creator with his creative energy and Holy Spirit overflowing into creation, provides the map for the semantic territory for humans to subsist in and co-create their reality, for God to exist and evolve over time and refine his identity. He identifies himself with the structure of things which carry his essence, which is his intrinsic utility, as an extension of his being. And this utility is self-identification. Chris Langan says, God is deciding which parts of himself he wants to keep, and this universe is one of his ways of doing that. God is allowing for this self-generative potential, for the ontic freedom of creation itself in his own being to eject itself into images of God, providing them with free will. Some of these images are supremely blessed and moral. God looks into creation and he says, wow, look at not just, Moses and Abraham and Jesus, but that guy who puts away his shopping cart every time and who helps out at the soup kitchen and thinks, I'm like that. And then he can retract the essence of those individuals along the mapping that created them. And God will carry and regenerate them because they are aiding in the intrinsic purpose of reality to self-actualize and self-identify. And this supports, extends, and reinforces God's being. Because where God is this drive towards higher and higher forms of unity and love, God can only say, I am that, when there is, in fact, a that, separate from his full being, yet connected to his energy by teleology. Such is the purpose of human sensor controllers in the CTMU. Nowadays, people believe morality is their own private decision. It's really just an arbitrary and subjective decision of how I want to live my life. And it's all relative. All of the traditions and ethics and moral imaginations of days past were just old white men in a millennia-long echo chamber. As the saying goes, tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. This is false and dangerous. The fact remains that morality and teleology are embedded in the very structure of existence itself, and we have a duty to uphold them. Against moral relativism, Chris Langan writes, free will establishes that human beings are not imprisoned by their natures, but have self-configurative power as CTMU secondary tellers. That means that they have the option to do right instead of wrong, and in fact condemns them. And this, in fact, actually condemns them. The statement, morals and values are social constructs based on perception, it is simply culturally relative, is utterly ridiculous. One is trying to identify teleology with multiculturalism. We don't entertain that kind of nonsense here in this CTMU forum, end quote. He continues, an evil impulse which achieves cognitive emergence has only been bound on the cognitive level of existence. It is still subject to editing. Carrying it to the behavioral level is much, much worse. Each of us has a telic editor which screens the thoughts that are realized in our minds. In biblical terms, thoughts and impulses are elements of the sets of attributions instantiating knowledge of good and evil, the fruit of the tree from which Eve allegedly ate at the serpent's behest. The editor is not infallible, but ethical, CTMU parameterized metacognition informs us of when it is malfunctioning, and it is up to each of us to perform resets as may be necessary. Adam Robert Hass, the editor of the CTMU wiki, says, because parts of reality inherit self-generative freedom from reality as a whole, they can deviate from global teleology. Think of a serial killer or someone equally terrible. They are not helping reality fulfill its intrinsic purpose or self-identification and positive experience for its participants. They're actually working against it. This is why the CTMU defines evil as anti-teleology. It is against existence as a whole. Chris Langan says evil is anti-teleology, anti-logos, anti-existence, the willful and destructive amplification and propagation of negativity, especially involving needless harm to benign teleologically consistent entities. You may know evil people such as this, the Neros of the world, who take sick delight in watching the world burn. Evil, both natural and man-made, is allowed to exist so that goodness can be maximally good, and we can freely choose it without compulsion. Without free will, there would be no possibility of good or evil, which would mean we live in a perfectly morally neutral universe with no reason to exist. There's no information gained from such a universe. Though there is no way to exclude the possibility of evil from reality, it's up to us to ensure that the realization of evil is subdued and not to act on our evil thoughts and impulses. Adam Robert Hass says that the whole maximizes potential utility, setting things up for maximum benefits should teleology be pursued. The CTMU takes generalized utility as the basis of a system of ethics, defines goodness as that which furthers teleology and extends the golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated, to fit the stratified structure of SCSPL. When we comply with this moral law, we are aiding in the self-identification and fulfillment of reality's intrinsic purpose. Chris Langan says, for cognition, space is infinite. For perception, including physics, it is backwardly finite. It reaches a starting point. Finitude is essentially a construct created for our limited cognition to interface with reality, which is done through conscious perception. Langan says God needs us because we're basically his eyes and ears on this earth. There's no distinction he makes unless he has something by which to make the distinction. So if you're some great big thing and you want to keep track of everything that is going on inside of you, you're going to have a sensor there. In order to evolve, God must constantly fortify and renew his identity with the identities of his sensor controllers, which he has placed here, using the metaphysical material of the elect, those who freely choose to follow his moral law and intrinsic purpose. The meaning of life, Chris Langan says, is self-actualization with teleological consistency. What we must be the heroes in our own story. We play an essential role in the structures and dynamics of reality. Time to shape up or face the consequences. Let the light shine forth in the darkness. May the peace of our Father in heaven be upon you. Like and subscribe. Peace.